Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge, and I am thrilled to have Tricia Aurand back on the show with me from the Lessons from the Screenplay team and also from my life for like the past 100 years. So,
Yes.
Tricia, what a delight to have you back. Welcome.
So glad to be back, Shawn. Thank you.
And we're watching a movie that I have not seen, that you have seen last time the tables were turned, and it was a movie you had not seen and I had seen, which was AI, Artificial Intelligence. I would encourage everyone to go back and listen to that episode because it's a great episode. And we decided to go with West Side Story, or you decided to, partially because there's a Steven Spielberg remake coming out this December, and he's our guy. Although who knows, with everything going on, who knows if that's actually still going to come out in December. I hope it does.
Me too. Crossing my fingers over that. And I really hoping that some of the other movies that are slated for the end of the year we're actually going to get to see. So
yeah, I need some Dune.
I need Dune so badly.
And I need some Steven Spielberg West Side Story. But this is a film, this is another example of a film that I actually own. I have a physical copy of West Side Story because my wife Sarah is a big fan. We have like a legit, like awesome box set that I have never touched. I've never watched this film. I know next to nothing about West Side Story. But this is one of your favorite films, would you say? Or where does this rank in terms of your film love?
I have very high esteem for this movie, and even more so since rewatching it over the weekend, which I did in preparation for this. So I'm a little ahead of you, just in terms of my thoughts are already fresh going into this first portion. But I did grow up with it, and so just sort of my background in terms of musicals is that like a lot of people who end up in the film business, for when you're really young, you don't get to make films right out of the gate, when you're 5 and 6 years old. I mean, maybe young kids now get to do that because they have iPhones or whatever. But we typically didn't get to start young because the technology of movie making in the 80s and 90s when we were growing up was something that we couldn't be trusted with. So You basically had to take your dad's camcorder when you were 11 or 12 years old and start making movies that way, if that's really what you wanted to do. But a lot of us
taped over all the old baby footage. That stuff didn't matter. You were an artiste and you had to express your 5-year-old self.
Yeah, exactly. And then you accidentally got it near a bunch of magnets. It was a whole thing. But so a lot of us got our start in theater, and just that performance bug and that storytelling bug came from theater. And so I was in theater from a very young age. I think I was in my first play when I was probably about 5 or 6, and grew up doing theater all through middle and high school. And my mother was also a huge musical fan. And so we grew up watching mostly actually this amazing array of musicals that came out in the 1960s. So when you think of the quote unquote movie musical, what we typically think of is something a little bit more like 40s, like 30s, 40s. So you're thinking more like Singing in the Rain, and into the 50s, that kind of movie musical era. But then in the late 50s and early 1960s, actually even through the 1960s, you had these huge Broadway musicals that were coming over into film. And so when you look at the 1960s Oscars, every year of the 1960s is crazy. 1961, West Side Story was the best Oscar winner. 1962, you had The Music Man. 1964 was My Fair Lady and Mary Poppins. 1965 was The Sound of Music.
Also Robert Wise, who directed this one.
Yep. 1967, you had Dr. Dolittle. 1968, Oliver was the Best Picture winner again.
Oh my God.
1969
so are these all Best Picture winners, or are these all movies that were released in
They are
in
all
those years?
either nominees or winners of Best Picture in the 1960s. So that's what we were working with. And those that string, that's what I grew up with. Watching that era of quote unquote movie musical, but it's really sort of this Broadway musical kind of thing that was being shared. It's sort of the golden age of Broadway shared over to the golden age of huge musicals,
Yeah.
prestige musicals in Hollywood. And some might argue kind of tipped off by West Side Story, because that was one of the earliest. It was 1961.
That doesn't surprise me. I didn't realize they were all so, like, they were all in that decade, released one right after the other, and that every single one of them was so, like, esteemed and highly regarded. And my relationship with musicals is almost completely different. But you and I had a similar, I mean, because we were in middle school together, we were in high school together, and we were in the theater program at our school
Yes,
together.
we were.
I've acted in plays that you've written, which
Oh
still
my
remains
God. Oh no, I forgot about that.
it still remains to this day one of the highlights of my entire acting career. And
I made
I
you
mean,
rhyme for an entire play. Do you remember
and
that?
I remember everything. What, but like you, I didn't necessarily grow up acting. I knew that I loved performing. I loved movies. I knew I wanted to somehow be involved. But I don't think I really started to do acting, like theater and things like that, until maybe late middle school, early high school. I think really my freshman year of high school is when I started really acting. But growing up, I think my earliest exposure to musicals was probably a lot of Disney animated movies, and I was not the audience for those. I mean,
Really?
yeah, at that age, I was, if it wasn't Power Rangers or Star Wars or Jurassic Park, I was not
You were like a
into it. And
Lion King fan, or like Beauty
oh
and
no,
the
I did love,
Beast?
The Lion King's a good example. Lion King, I guess I would say the early, like the early Disney movies. Lion King, Aladdin, anything that was released in the 90s, I was the right age for that. I loved the Lion King.
Yeah.
But I wasn't into like Bambi or Snow White or Dumbo or any of the early stuff that I think was really readily available in my house. It just wasn't for me. But I think also being a guy, when you're that age, it's like, oh, musicals are icky and they're for girls and I hate them and I would never, what's the point? They just burst into song and dance and this is stupid. That went on for a good portion of my life. I would say probably through high school there was still that part of me that I was like, look, I just don't get musicals. They're kind of fun. I was in musicals in high school that I enjoyed being in, but like never, I don't think I ever really just fully embraced them. It was never something I really, and my mom, we talked about.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I because I maybe just don't remember, but do you also sing? Like, are you like a natural singer? Do you like singing?
I enjoy singing very much, and now I do. And I know we we were one of the musicals we did
Oh
in
my
high
God,
school.
no.
So I wasn't someone who would go out of my way to sing. So this is funny. In our freshman year of high school, we were in a play called. Were you in this? Were you in?
Yes, I was.
Oliver?
The Musical Adventures of Oliver Twist.
Yeah, the Musical Adventures of Oliver Twist. I played Mr. Bumble, who was the angry, I guess the head of the orphanage where Oliver
That's correct.
lived. When I was cast in the role, I did not realize I had an entire song that I had to sing on my own. I thought I was like, oh, I might have to sing with the chorus. That's fine. I don't have any solo performances. And then I found out after I was cast, like probably way too late into the rehearsals. It's like, oh, I
You
have
had a
solo
whole
part.
song. A
Yes,
whole song. Just
I had a
you.
whole song. And I don't consider myself the best singer. I can sing. I definitely did not want to be singing. It was not something that I was like, I want to be an actor. And I also want to like perform and do song and dance numbers. So that was like traumatizing for me to find that out. And it ended up being so much fun. And even I won the first performance, I butchered the song and forgot the lyrics.
You did.
And just,
I remember
and just flat out on stage was like, I don't remember the lyrics. And for some reason, everyone thought that was the best thing ever. And I think that may have just been a trial by fire that like somehow unlocked the door to my
to my recollection, you just kind of goofed off instead of singing and just
I said I don't remember this part in tune to the song, and everyone applauded. Like I just remember thinking like, if I can forget the lyrics to a song and still entertain people, then what was I afraid of? It's so that I got it right the other nights, but No one ever let me forget that, and that was clearly a highlight for everybody. But it wasn't like I was going out then and saying like, I can't wait to do more musicals. I've got to dive into
Right.
the genre. My mom loved musicals. Again, I was associating it with it's a female thing. I'm just a guy. I just don't like musicals. She loved The Sound of Music. I did like The Sound of Music. But again, I think through high school and college, what changed my mind was in my first or second year of film school, I watched Singing in the Rain, and it just was like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's hilarious.
It's one of the
It's
greatest
smart.
movies ever.
It really is, and I would probably put it, if I were to rank a list, I would probably put it in my top 10 favorite films of all time. It would likely end up there. But it charmed me and caught me off guard so much. And I think it just occurred to me, in my later high school years, I'd gotten used to like goofing off and going to like high school dances and homecomings and proms and just being ridiculous and enjoying the dancing. And I think somehow Singing in the Rain unlocked that part of my brain that made me realize like, oh, all the ridiculous stuff I've been doing in real life, all the dancing and that desire to just like, let's just dance and have fun. It was like Singing in the Rain was like the epitome of that. And it just showed me, oh, I do love this. I love these dance numbers. Which is funny because Singing in the Rain it has one big like stereotypical like Broadway-esque dance number that's kind of a musical within a musical, but for the most part the song and dance routines are they're either 1, 2, 3 people,
right?
They're not super bombastic, but they have so much charm and bring so much joy. And I think after that it just clicked with me. I was like, I don't think I hate musicals at all. I think I actually really loved them, and I think it was Singing in the Rain that kind of unlocked that part of my brain. But it's just the charm of, and even now I just get a kick out of any great rousing song and dance routines like La La Land. The opening scene of La La Land, I was like, this is exactly what I want every movie to be in general. But
I mean, I'll be super curious to hear what you think about this movie, because there is no doubt that the 60s musical is a very different animal than the like 40s and 50s Singing in the Rain kind of thing that we're talking about here. Because in fact, I feel like Singing in the Rain was always like made way later than I think it was. Yeah, 52.
I think it's because it's talking about like the golden age of Hollywood and moving into sound. You think it's older, but it's actually later. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's 1952. So it's still right in that kind of
sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. The movie musical, quote unquote. That like more of like An American in Paris and others, like Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, that kind of like movie musical. The 1960s musicals are very different. And like I said, heavily influenced by West Side Story. But I think that one of the ones that you might have seen that would be a really interesting comp here would be Oliver, actually.
Yeah.
Did you? Because I know we watched it when we were in The Musical Adventures of Oliver Twist.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Which, for the record, for those of you not familiar with this musical, it's because it's not a proper good real musical. We went to a tiny school that didn't have any money, and so we couldn't do any large like real musicals. So that's why
knockoffs.
We did knockoffs. That's right.
So if you're thinking we were performing like things like, Consider Yourself,
no, we were not.
That one, that's the only song
we were
I know.
Performing
we were not singing
The
that.
City of London. Like that's what we were performing.
Oh, it's taking me back.
But Oliver, the 1968 musical, is a great example of what a 60s like Broadway style musical was, or something like Hello Dolly is in there. They're huge and they're incredibly stylized, but what they're essentially trying to do is film the play with like more production value. So they're not at all the like Singing in the Rain style of like, it's just a movie, but then they're going to dance in the office and sing like Moses supposes his toes are roses. They're not going to do that. They're going to put 50 people on stage and have a huge dance number.
But it will look like a stage and a set, and it's very stylized in that way.
Exactly. And it's going to be a huge wide shot with the camera, and you're going to see all of the different parts of the dancing and all of this kind of stuff. So that's kind of, just to spoiler alert you a little bit, that's more what you're going to see from West Side Story. You're not going to see like that older style of movie musical. However, West Side Story Well, I don't want to tell you too much about it, but you have to know something about it already.
I will not lie to you. I know next to nothing
You
about
know
West
what
Side
the
Story.
story is, right?
No, I don't. I don't even know what the story of West Side Story is. I don't know what the West Side Story is. I know that there's a
Wow.
woman named Maria in it who's played by Natalie Wood, who I
Correct.
only just realized was a huge actress. I'll tell you the
Amazing.
story. I know we talked about this when we went to Sundance. I brought this up because there was a documentary that I missed that I really wanted to see about Natalie Wood. We had just watched my wife and I and our family, we watched for Christmas Miracle on 34th Street, the
Oh,
original,
yeah.
and she's the little girl in that. And
Correct.
I watched it and I was like, who's this little girl? She's so talented. Whatever happened to her? And Sarah was like, that's Natalie
It's
Wood, like
Natalie
Rebel
Wood.
Without a Cause, West Side Story, like so much. And I was just like, okay, I had no idea. So
Mhm.
again, what part of the reason I'm very excited to watch this is because she's in it,
Yeah.
and I apparently only remember her from Miracle on 34th Street. I've even seen Rebel Without a Cause, and I just don't remember much of it. But I know that I know there's like a point where there's lots of they're gangs and they're snapping because
Correct.
that's just something Um, but I couldn't. There's like rival gangs, and they're all maybe the Warriors, the movie The Warriors, is a knockoff of West Side Story because there are plenty of gangs with colorful outfits
Well,
in that film.
they're influenced by the same, the Warriors is 70s, but like same kind of like New York City concern over gangs,
Yes.
right? So like there was this social concern that was started really in the 1950s because of like teen rebellion. Now, for the record, teens in the 1950s didn't invent rebellion, but they did like invent some hysteria over it or like inspire
Right.
some hysteria over it that really entered into the public consciousness at the time. Teens have always been rebelling, but it just wasn't really like explosive combination of teen rebellion plus the media like explosion and some of the other things that were shifting in the 1950s. So like what you have, it starts that cycle of like we see teens behaving badly on TV, therefore teens behave badly, but
Mhm.
what inspired what, right? It sort of becomes
Yes.
this loop. And then of course rock and roll music, all of that starts in the 1950s and then into the 60s, but especially in New York because of the density of the population and all kinds of other like social changes that were happening with immigration and different cultures clashing in very small neighborhoods in New York City. You had this real panic from the public of there's these gangs of roving teenagers. What are we going to do?
They're snapping and they're dancing and they're singing. It's a complete nightmare.
Exactly. And that like led into, some of the edgier movies that were also made about the same phenomenon, kind of
Right.
like The
Right.
Warriors.
I would love to also compare this to The Sound of Music, because this is also directed by Robert Wise, who co-directed it with the Broadway
Correct.
film
Jerome
director.
Robbins. Yeah.
Right. So, and he had directed the play on Broadway, and he kind of got kicked off the production because
Yeah.
apparently they were going over budget, over schedule. But what's really sweet about Robert Wise is he apparently, even though the guy was technically fired, Wise still was like, no, we're still collaborating. You're still a part of this. And he was like, yeah, I think he should be co-credited on the film.
I mean, this is just like when you look at the people who created the musical and then also created the movie, because a lot of them were the same people. That's something else that
Right.
has to be like said. So Robert Wise was the movie director that they brought in, but Jerome Robbins, who directed and choreographed the original Broadway musical, is basically responsible for a lot of the direction and almost all of the choreography in the movie. And a lot
Right.
of the other creative team was there as well. So you have Bernstein, you have Sondheim. This was Sondheim's first Broadway musical. And
Oh,
he was
wow.
he was super young at the time, and they just kind of like discovered him and we're like, we've got this great lyricist, like let's bring him in. And so you have Bernstein and Sondheim, and then you have Jerome Robbins, and then you have Irene Sheriff, who like we'll have to get into it in the second half of this, but the costuming, she's just this
Right.
like costuming legend, and she did the Broadway show and she did the movie. Like it's unreal the creative team that you have on this. And so
I
that's
mean,
another huge part of like
and of course, Sound of Music was a few years later. And when I think of Sound of Music, there is the bombast and there is kind of the corny sort of like, we're all having a great time, minus all the Nazi stuff. But there is this sense of reality to Sound of Music. It's not like
Right.
it's a little bit more like, if we're using Singing in the Rain as an example of something that's a little bit more grounded in reality, Sound of Music is kind of like that too. There's nothing like, there aren't any big bombastic dance numbers. There's some songs and some running through the hills, and
Yeah, they have this device in The Sound of Music where music is part of the plot, where she is
yes,
a musician. She's there to teach the kids music, among other things. And
yeah,
then, like, you have that big number that's like a concert. That's the finale or like the climax of the show. So they have like a sort of a plot device or structure that leans in. And a lot of, we see this often in movie musicals, right? Where that's the whole thing
yeah,
about Singing in the Rain, is that they're making a movie and then they have to turn it into a movie musical in order
right,
to save it. So it's built into the plot in a way that
yeah,
these like sort of 60s, especially 60s like period things like Oliver and Hello Dolly, those are not really like, they have no construction that enables them to like transition into a smooth, now we're gonna dance time.
yes, yes. So that is, I'm excited to watch it in general. I'm also excited to watch it just because I like Robert Wise a lot. I mean, outside of
Mhm.
this, he did The Day the Earth Stood Still. He did Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is not a great movie, but also not as terrible as some people say it is. That is another episode we did on Missing Frames. But I like him a lot. I'm just curious to see. Did he do any other musicals in his lifetime? I feel like he did this and he did Sound of Music, and that's it. So it's just very interesting that he did two of the most influential, biggest musicals of the entire
Ever.
film world, and then was just like, that's it, I'm good, never again. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think he did any others.
And not to, again, color your experience of this in any way, but I'll be interested to hear what you think about all of the performances in it, because this kind of was Natalie Wood's like star making performance. I mean, she had
Yeah.
been in Miracle on 34th Street, and she'd also done a movie right before this called Splendor in the Grass with Warren Beatty, which I saw recently for the first time, and wow, I really hated it. It's like, I was like, this checks all my boxes. It's this like romantic thing with young Natalie Wood and Warren Beatty, and like, wow, it sucks. But that's kind of where she was discovered. They had been talking about wanting Warren Beatty, and they were watching footage from Splendor in the Grass, and they're like, you know what? He's not right, but Natalie Wood, maybe she's our girl. And she is fantastic in this. But I'll be really interested to hear your take on the performances as well.
Yeah, I'm genuinely looking forward to watching this. I don't know. Should we just get to it?
Yep.
There's not much more to say, so I will watch this movie and we will be back to discuss.
Now available to own on video cassette.
All right, we're back. Tricia, West Side Story is a wonderful, wonderful film. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yay!
And, not my favorite musical, but undoubtedly one of the great musicals. I mean,
yeah.
it was. I was pleasantly surprised. I was entertained. I was overjoyed. I thought it was a little goofy. And
Of course.
then I knew nothing about the movie going into it. So then I was completely caught off guard when it got really depressing at the end.
When my brain was kind of quietly melting during the first half of this episode, where you were like, oh, I know nothing. And I was like resisting with every part of myself, going like, Romeo and Juliet, you
I
don't
didn't know that. Or maybe I'd read something like that. But I think I'd read it because as I was watching, I was like, oh, yeah. Romeo and Juliet. I see. Okay.
Yeah, I truly don't know how you didn't know that. And I can't imagine trying to watch this movie without knowing that, but God bless you.
So I did it. I found a way to do it. And I am thrilled that I finally got to see this. But first of all, my big question, we talked a little bit about it in the first part of the episode, where I was kind of like, you kind of set me up as it's very much a recreation of the Broadway play, which it absolutely is.
Yes.
And that kind of set up in my mind when I think of Broadway musical, and we discussed this a little bit, I'm thinking of the sequence in Singing in the Rain that is the musical within the musical, where it's big and colorful, but very clearly it's on sets and it's almost artificial. There's a little bit of that in West Side Story. There are things that are very clearly sets. I was not expecting, and this is after the 20-minute opening prologue, which I think is in The Sound of Music, but is definitely in Star Trek The Motion Picture, where there's just a prologue of just orchestral music to set the mood.
Yeah.
That is something Robert Wise seems to really enjoy.
I mean, I love it in this movie. Like, with the abstract, the title.
Well, it's a musical. You need to have that. I mean, it made sense to do it for this.
I believe so much overture is the word you're looking for. Overture.
Overture, yes. So that was great. And then we open with the overhead shots of New York City, which apparently I was reading that wasn't necessarily something people were used to seeing. Like especially with a big city like New York, people were like, oh, you want to shoot the landmarks and things like that. But Robert Wise was like, no, we're doing a bird's eye view. And everyone was like, what do you mean? Whose perspective is it? And they're like, I don't know, God's, who knows? It's just like, this is New York. So first and foremost, that kind of surprised me, because thinking the movie was going to be a little bit more artificially inclined and a little bit more focused on like, oh, big colorful sets, I was like, oh, okay, we're announcing right off the gate that this is New York City. This is happening in New York City.
Yes.
And then we get this extended silent, quote unquote, mostly silent dance number that opens the film, all on location.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there was if there was anything shot on a set in that opening sequence, I couldn't tell you what it was, because I was like, this looks real. The backdrop looks real. It doesn't look like a matte painting. It doesn't look like something they put up. So that really threw me for a loop. That really impressed me.
But the way that they shoot even spaces, the way that, like, even if it's like on location or whatever, the way that they shoot the spaces are pretty abstracted, right? Where there's like chain link fences without clear doors or gates. Like, how do you get into this lot? It's just chain link on all sides. I can't tell. Or it's brick, right? Or it's whatever. You can't see the tops of the buildings. So you have just like these sort of planes, like these vertical and horizontal planes that intersect the frame without any clear spatial relationship to each other. So like, that's sort of like the aesthetic of the whole thing, which is very much borrowed from the design of the Broadway sets. So the Broadway sets were just these like planes, like metal and brick and like fire escapes and railings that you don't know your way into or out of them. Sort of this like labyrinth of spaces. And so regardless of whether or not it was shot on location, the way it emulates this stylized interpretation of like the neighborhoods of New York City.
Absolutely. I think I think what I'm saying is what I appreciated about it is the sense of like, this is really happening. It's not like a magical world where it's an alternative New York City. They kind of set the standard and say, no, this is, I mean, the whole, most of the movie is taking place like in studios and on studio sets.
Right.
But like, I was not expecting that. And just the logistics of them shooting this dance number, which by the way, that opening dance number was fantastic. My first thought, I was like, well, if this is what the gang activity was like in New York, that's not so bad. I mean, can I join a gang? What is this? Why are people complaining?
Yeah.
I thought, like, if this is the worst thing your gangs are doing, you're in a pretty good spot. But what a great way. I remember, what is his name? Jerome Robbins?
Yeah. The choreographer and co-director.
The choreographer, the director of the Broadway play.
Yeah.
I think he said he got the script and he's like, what is this introduction? Like, what's the story? It just says they dance. What is the story there?
Yeah.
And I know that was a bit of a struggle for him. Like, he really, really struggled with it. But I'll say this much. They like succeeded tremendously because immediately it sets the tone. Immediately you kind of like see the ridiculousness of like, these guys are tough and now they're doing like ballet moves, but then you almost instantly settle into it. And it also visually, very cinematically, without words or dialogue to set anything up, you get a really solid, great sense of the dynamic. You know who the Jets are, you know who the Sharks are, you get the sense of their rivalry, you get the sense of the Jets, like they own the place. Right. And like they are, you know, they're just on the basketball court and people are terrified of them.
Yeah.
They are nice enough to steal your basketball, but give it back.
They weirdly give it back to you. Don't even worry about it.
That's right. So,
the thing that I respect the hell out of when it comes to this movie is, and also just the text of the play itself and just the approach to the material, is the blending of aesthetics, genres, references. So what you have, you know, basically in the entire approach, and people have been reinterpreting Shakespeare forever and taking Shakespearean texts and archetypes and setting them in different places. So that in itself is not as novel, but the exact way that this is approached here, because it's Shakespeare, it's reinterpreted in terms of language and in terms of just like setting and time and content, but then it's blended with like musical theater and that like big Broadway style kind of thing. And it's just like, it's so much of the contemporary, you know, at the time, the contemporary aesthetic and like sort of a little bit more edginess. It's dealing with contemporary social issues. It's hearkening back to this classical text. It's doing this abstracted music and dance thing. It's just like, it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work at all. And
it should fall apart completely. It should be bombastic and overblown and like really self-serious or self-important, but it's not.
Exactly. Like, that's the thing, is that you could easily have that pendulum is so delicately in the middle of all of these things. Like, imagine if they had gone like even grittier and more drab with it, which might have been a temptation, where then everyone is like wearing shades of brown and they're like mumbling their lines like Marlon Brando, right? You could have seen them go that way with it, but they lean into some of this like theatricality to the music and to the dance. It's so genius.
It's great. That was the biggest, one of the most impressive things to me. I think cinematic musicals, we don't see a lot of, I can't think, you probably know more than I do about this, but when it comes to cinematic adaptations of musicals that have existed in Broadway form or have existed on the stage prior, like Singing in the Rain is a movie that I think took songs from other
which was
things,
very common of that kind of movie musical at the time, but the story itself was written, and it, you know, those movie musicals were kind of cobbled together of like standards, usually some originals, sometimes things from other shows or plays.
But that was planned as a movie. It wasn't like a Broadway,
right?
Like, so it feels cinematic, and it doesn't. You don't feel the stiltedness of trying to take a stage play and putting it in the form of cinema, which it just doesn't work. They're two different art forms, and they need to be done as such. And what was so impressive about West Side Story is it somehow takes the Broadway play, but it infuses it with the cinematic energy. And that has to come from the fact that you have the co-direction of Robert Wise, who's a veteran filmmaker, with Jerome Robbins, who's a veteran choreographer and Broadway director, a theatrical director. So that's something I almost wish we could see more of, because I was so impressed with how cinematic it felt.
Oh,
it didn't feel contained to the frame. It felt like the energy of Broadway, or the energy of like a big production, a theatrical production, but you also got the sense of like, there's somebody behind the camera who knows how to shoot this. And somehow it's a perfect marriage. And I can't think of a lot of examples where something like that really works. I think Sound of Music was a play first too, right? It is an adaptation. So that's it's another example. It's probably why they had Robert Wise direct it. But that is Sound of Music and West Side Story are two, and West Side Story is more theatrical than The Sound of Music. The Sound of Music is
definitely
more driven by these locations and these stories. It doesn't have that many dramatic dance numbers. It's a little less inclined to what you would expect from a musical on stage. But that was something that I was really like, I could admire West Side Story as a musical, but also as a piece of filmmaking.
Oh, definitely. I mean, think about those, the amazing, and they're the most iconic shots in it, of as the camera is tracking backward and the dancers are moving like basically straight into camera and just doing something completely amazing.
I love that.
I love that too. But it feels like the storytelling goes beyond the edges of the frame. I feel like that's such an important piece of capturing the theatricality to it, because when you're sitting in a theater and you're watching a play on stage, one of the biggest differences, aside from the like that sort of like magical energy of where you're sitting in the room with the people who are doing the performance, which is in its own like important thing to name when you're talking about theater. But the other thing is that no one is telling you where on the stage to look. Like, perhaps there are spotlights pointed at one person and while they're doing a number, and so you want to be looking at that person. Or perhaps there is only one thing going on the vast stage. But you as an audience member are free to look wherever you want.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what you have to capture if you're going to commit to this style of bringing a play into this. So you have to have these big wide shots, and you get the sense when you watch it that the number and the action is happening beyond the edges of the frame. And if the camera panned over like 2 feet, there would be a guy dancing or doing whatever, like, because there was. Right.
Well, it's the editing too. It's like you said, you need to have those wide shots, but it's the fact that it's not fast cutting. It's not things like that. You're getting them. It's kind of like the same thing as I think Every Frame of Painting did the essay about Jackie Chan, why Jackie Chan fighting is so comedy and fighting, but also what's so brilliant about it is you get the chance to see that it's Jackie doing all this. Jackie and his stunt team are fighting, they're throwing the punches, they're doing the flips. It's not fast cutting to distract from the fact that, oh, it's a stuntman, it's not the real actor.
Exactly.
It's the same thing with West Side Story. Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins were smart enough to know, like, let's show this amazing choreography. We don't need to dress it up. We don't need to make it, the cinematography is incredible and appropriately cinematic. They're, like you said, I love when they're doing, is it Cool? Is that the name of the song? In the garage?
It's the most famous scene in it. It's so good.
It's amazing. But like you said, that shot specifically of the camera being like pulled back as they're like rushing towards it. So you get that sense of like, oh, it's very cinematic. But the staging of it and the choreography, Wise also is smart enough to let it play. And he's smart enough to know when to stop moving the camera and to let it just kind of play out.
And the design, we have to talk about the production design, because that goes back into that thing of where if you look at any place, anywhere on the screen, you don't have to be looking at the actors or whatever. You're looking at something incredibly cinematic and spectacular and immaculately designed. Like, the colors in this are unreal, and the way it's lit and like the way the spaces are designed, like I was saying, with that abstraction where like even when they're standing in an alleyway, you can't see the mouths of the alleyway. There's just like walls on both sides of them, and the containment of that the parking garage where they do that number Cool, it with the headlights of the trucks pointed at, like, they wouldn't be on. It doesn't make any logical sense, but it's an incredibly cinematic choice to have the bright lights of this and the low ceiling and the floor, which is so often in frame. It creates that like claustrophobia in the space. It's just so well designed. It's ridiculous.
I like that you keep bringing up the abstract nature of it, because I think I read or I watched when it was either in one of the documentaries I was watching about it, or I read something about it, but the stage show was a little more grounded. Like, it was a little bit more realistic. It wasn't as, I'm sure there were kind of like characteristics of theatricality and colorful lights, but I heard, like, because the costumes in this, the production design in this, very like in your face, but not obnoxiously so. But I'm thinking of like Maria's bedroom, that window pane with just like colored glass. And, when Tony is walking down the street and he's just in this other, like, I just met Maria and and the pink colors, there's no justification for it. And apparently that wasn't really in the original version of the story or the original production.
Well, there's no way that it could be. So it goes back to the blend of what does film do when film is at its best? What does theater do when theater is at its best and bringing it in? Like, even the rooftop scene, which if you think about a rooftop, there shouldn't be anything around, right? Like, there's probably like nothing on the like rooftop in terms of like vertical clutter. And yet they cluttered the hell out of that rooftop. There's like those bars and structures on the roof. And then what is it that they're sitting on even during that scene at the beginning of America?
I don't know. It is a contraption that was invented solely for this movie. We never saw it again.
But yeah, they took care with each and every single one of those spaces. So it creates this rich, rich backdrop for
Yes.
all of the action that's taking place. That just
It's the variety of the locations. It's the
Yep.
variety of the songs. Because about halfway through, I was starting to feel the length, and it's when they sing Officer Grubkey. I was like,
Krupke,
I was
yeah.
like Krubkey. I was like, is this another? Are we doing another song? But the song is so charming, and the performances are so charming that it kind of wins you over. And again, it stresses not just the importance of the content and how make sure the music's good. It's a musical, but also just the way they stage everything and putting it in different locations and giving that each song has its own identity and very specific kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
And it gives it variety so that even when you're concerned, like, oh, are we singing another song? Then you're kind of swept up in it and you're not as much annoyed by that.
Yeah. I wish that I had the musical language to talk more intelligently about the music and why it's so amazing.
What are you talking? We are the foremost experts on musical criticism on the planet, as far as I'm aware.
But I can't. I mean, but even someone as ignorant about music as I am can like identify. Oh, so you have America, with this like, and this was one of the big selling points. They're like, oh, if we set it in this like Puerto Rican neighborhood with Puerto Rican characters, we can do kind of Latin influenced music, and then we can also do more big Broadway style music. We can also do like slightly more like opera and more like symphonic things. So like I think about the Dance of the Gym that's wordless, but it is its own piece of music, versus something like Maria, which is this like more operatic song. And it has, since I rewatched this, the song Maria has just been haunting me. Like,
oh my God. Right before we started recording, Sarah is usually in this office with me. And I was like, I got to record, I got to do this episode. And she's leaving. And just spontaneously, I just started going, Maria, I just met a girl named Maria. And she was like, Shawn, stop it. And I was like, I can't help it.
I did a little bit of reading and now of course I can't find it. Talking about the musical intervals, like the way that the melody moves, like to each of those notes. Da, 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 da. It's so beautiful. And I'm sure like psychologists know how that kind of like musical progression incepts itself into your brain and just it gives you goosebumps every time you hear it. It's gorgeous music.
I didn't realize. So first of all, there's it's funny. West Side Story was criticized when it first came out as like, oh, it doesn't have any hummable songs, which I don't know necessarily is true. I do think like watching it the first time, there isn't anything that immediately strikes me as like oh, this is super catchy. Like, singing in the
well,
I'm
it's
thinking
not
of Singing
pop
in the Rain.
music. Yeah.
Yes. If I'm thinking of Singing in the Rain, there are like 4 or 5 songs that you're thinking about, like good morning. You're thinking about all that stuff. West Side Story has a couple more, it's a little more abstract. There's not so much like
and difficult.
Yes. So some of the songs I was like, I don't know that I love these. I didn't dislike them, but it was one of those things where I kind of understood like why somebody might walk out of that thinking like, oh, it wasn't successful as a musical because I'm not thinking about all this stuff. But what I didn't know is that the song America, first of all, you mentioned that. I have heard that song. I didn't know that was from this. The other one that caught me completely by surprise was the I Feel Pretty, oh so pretty. Yeah. I didn't know that was West Side Story, but I knew the song. So again, these are songs that I think it's funny that at the time people were like, oh, nobody's going to think of these. And yet these are songs that have somehow bled into our cultural consciousness that even I, having no clue what this movie was about or what the music was, had heard those songs all over the place.
Well, I Feel Pretty is sort of the most, if I can put it this way, is sort of the most like Rodgers and Hammerstein-y, like one in it. Like it's sort of what musicals were at the time. And that's why it's a little bit more hummable and has made its way in rather than something like, I mean, just try walking around and like singing Maria. It's very difficult. Or Tonight. Tonight is very hard. Tonight. It's like not so easy to just like sing while you do the dishes. or in your car or whatever.
I think when we think of West Side Story, though, I think we're thinking more about, do you think we're thinking more about choreography versus music? Because I feel like when I think of this movie and when I compliment this movie and I talk about this movie, I almost feel like the choreography, this is not to downplay the quality of the music because I think it is great and it's fantastic. But in some ways, I think West Side Story's power is the choreography of it.
Yes. Of course it is. And when you think about this movie, you don't think of, or I guess perhaps you do, of like Richard Beymer, standing singing Maria. Perhaps that's the first thing you think of, but mostly what I think of is cool, right?
Exactly. The
or I
snapping.
think of the dance where everyone is dancing, or the snapping. Truthfully, the first thing that I think of is Russ Tamblyn and like his just amazing acrobatics where he's like just tumbling this entire movie. Like, what?
Let's talk about Russ Tamblyn.
Can we please?
Like, that dude is awesome. Everyone in this movie is awesome.
Yes.
But like he in particular, I was just like, are these guys, I didn't know if they were actors or professional dancers. They are so good. Their dance moves and their performances are so impeccable. But here's the thing about Russ Tamblyn, as well as Richard Beymer. Here's the thing. I had a moment when I was watching. First of all, Russ Tamblyn looked familiar to me. I was like, why do I recognize him?
It's because of his daughter.
No, it's even better. This completely blew my mind. First of all, Russ Tamblyn anyone who is a regular listener of this show knows I'm a giant David Lynch fan.
Okay.
By extension, I'm a giant Twin Peaks fan.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Richard Beymer and Russ Tamblyn are both in Twin Peaks.
Yes, they are.
That blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. This is insane. I mean, they're both amazing in this movie and in Twin Peaks. But what's funny is Richard Beymer almost gets. It's almost like the Mark Hamill in A New Hope effect.
He does. He really does. He's the less interesting character.
He gets like trashed for it because it's that like, oh Maria, I love you so much, and that kind of like very
so earnest,
goofy,
yeah.
Yes, it's so earnest that it can backfire, and people like criticized him. Apparently, that was something that kind of
and he hated his own performance as well. For the record, I
think that's so sad.
It is so sad because
it is. Let's be real. It's a goofy performance. It's definitely. I can see why people would watch it and say, oh yeah, this is a bit silly, but it's also super endearing and really, really sweet and charming.
Yeah, no,
as a Twin Peaks fan, he especially in Twin Peaks: The Return, which is the latest season, he gives a really subtle and emotional performance that you would never connect at all to this character of Tony. I would never have again. My mind is still being blown by this, but I do want to talk a bit about their performances because, like you said, they're incredible. They're doing the work that, again, I felt like people got hurt for sure. People must have gotten seriously injured. There's one where I think, was it Tony who climbed the chain link fence?
Yes. That's Tony.
Over it. I couldn't handle that.
No. I've been thinking about that nonstop since I watched it a couple days ago. It's because it's just like one wide shot. It's after like anybody's comes through the pipe and she like picks him up and she's like, Tony, we gotta go. She goes back through the pipe, which goes, it like sort of Mario's its way around like the fence. His move is to climb this. It's honestly like a 25-foot chain link fence. Just scramble up it like he's Spider-Man. Go up and over the top. And as he flips over the top, he like barely kind of catches one hand on the other side of it, but kind of just drags down the other side of it and then just sort of scrambles away.
There's so many moments like that in this movie where I was like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Were they dancers first or were they actors first? And apparently Jerome Robbins was just such a force to be reckoned with and so terrifying and empowering that these actors were essentially just scared into giving incredible dance performances. Now they did have dancing backgrounds, and I know that Russ Tamblyn was in musicals and things like that and did theater.
And of course was a gymnast. Is the thing about Russ Tamblyn. It's like like when I watch his performance in Officer Krupke, And he's literally like, I'm just gonna do a handstand and jump up and down on my hands in the middle of the sidewalk while singing and like just continue on with the song.
He does like
nuts.
a backflip at one point too that I was just like, and he's just like, whatever. And I was like, what? Was there a mat anywhere? No. You can, like you said, you can see the ground in the shot. So
yes, Russ Tamblyn is spectacular. And thinking about that, it's in the Jets song, I believe, which is what that number is called right at the beginning. It's just called like the Jets song. But like when he jumps up on that pole that's going across the alleyway and he like sits on it, just kind of perches right on it and then swings down by his knees and just like a perfect dismount while doing his number.
That was the moment where it occurred to me. I was like, hold on, what is happening? Like,
hang on.
How is anyone alive at all following this film's production?
I mean, just tremendous from start to finish. And we should also name that George Chakiris, who plays Bernardo in this, won an Oscar for it. Like he is spectacular.
And Rita Moreno.
Yes. They won supporting actor Oscars for this. Soundly deserved. They're really incredible. So
the America again, what I love, any big crowd dance numbers, tightly choreographed. I loved all that. I love all of that. And I feel like that's something that even I was missing from Singing in the Rain. Their big epic dance number isn't nearly as exciting or fulfilling as the 5 or 6, 7,
any
8, 9.
One of these. Yeah.
Yes. And West Side Story, it's almost like the advent of those. I know it's not the first musical, it's not the last musical, but it feels so seminal, especially from a cinematic standpoint, as far as like, it has 5 or 6 big crowd dance numbers. And America is another one of those most impressive. And apparently it was just the women who danced on the Broadway show. Yeah. And for the movie, Jerome decided, let's just get everybody. Let's not leave the guys out. Let's get everybody involved. And I can't imagine it any other way.
No, it has this wonderful energy to it, this back and forth where Bernardo and Anita are like arguing, but they kind of like make it this philosophical argument about what it means to be an immigrant and sort of like how they've experienced that differently and like what their value systems are. It's so it obviously is dated to an extent, but it still feels like overall a relevant conversation. Yeah. And while being an awesome, very catchy song with incredible dancing in it.
Yes.
Like, I mean, Rita Moreno is just power from start to finish. When she's on screen, like even when she's standing next to Natalie Wood, who is wonderful, you're looking at Rita Moreno and you're just like, the woman is made of fire. She's gonna burn down everything. Like,
I know,
she's incredible.
Well, Natalie Wood is great too. I didn't realize that it wasn't her singing voice. It wasn't, and same with Richard Beymer, it wasn't him singing. Still, they're both great. I think Natalie Wood is definitely the stronger of the two performances because she definitely feels it's anchored a little bit more in reality. I think if there's anything, West Side Story is a movie that, and a musical in general, that is so driven by performance and musical numbers. The story is the only thing where I would start to knock it down a little bit, because the Romeo and Juliet, I had to keep reminding myself, like, it's just, it's a take on Romeo and Juliet, but the romance is so, it is very much
contrived.
Like guy sees girl. Yes, they see each other and they fall in love and they're immediately like, we will die for each other. I had to keep reminding myself of the Romeo and Juliet comparisons because of the fact that they're in love with each other and there's no real like depth to it. No. It's just a lot of staring and longingly looking at each other. And then it just gets more and more ridiculous as it goes on. Like,
of course it does.
I was, again, the movie is very charming and endearing, and something's going to go wrong, but I did not realize to what extent things would go wrong. And when Tony, first of all, Rip is killed by Bernardo. Mm-hmm. Then Tony kills, and by this point I was like, whatever I thought this was, I don't know where this is going. Yeah. I did not realize everyone kills everybody.
Put it together that it was Romeo and Juliet at that point.
Right. I was keeping it in the back of my mind, and I'd read a little snippet of Roger Ebert's review of the film where he's like, oh, the film can't commit to its darkness. So I was like, oh, does it just kind of
okay, so yeah,
sprinkle little flowery bits over the darker elements of Romeo and Juliet? No, it doesn't. But so it really caught me off guard when all that started happening. But in terms of the ridiculousness of it, Tony kills Bernardo, Maria's brother. And then he goes to her after she learns that he did it. And she's like, I hate you. And he's like, no, I didn't mean to. And she's like, okay, I forgive you. Let's sleep together. I was like, all right, well, I guess I kind of have to just go with it and just accept it. But that was tough to, that was a tougher pill to swallow when it was just like, oh, but they're just in love. And I was like, are they though? They've known each other for a day.
Well, and that's the thing is the humanity of some of the characters gets a little bit lost when you are beholden to this text that, you know, it takes some work to kind of like sell the plot of Romeo and Juliet anyway, right? And and I do think that they kind of made it, this is debatable. I think they approached it wisely in a number of ways. And one of the ways that they were smart about it is that the actors are young. They're not teenagers, but they are young. Like Natalie Wood looks young. You buy that she's like probably impulsive and like not really able to control her emotions or like not making rational decisions. And the same thing, the way that the like whole street gang construction works is if it's like young boys or like, you know, essentially teens. And these guys don't look like teens, but they also aren't in their 40s. You know what I'm saying?
No, they look like young. Yes, you're right.
Right. And so and actually like, and think about, you know, some of the, especially like the younger characters, somebody like Baby John, who's supposed to look young in the first place. But yeah, you kind of, even Russ Tamblyn to me looks young. And they did turn down, there were bigger stars that they like wanted to get to be in this, but those guys were older. And so
Elvis, they wanted Elvis to play Tony. Which what would this movie have been? Like,
oh my God.
You know, Elvis is great, but Elvis is Elvis. And I don't know that I could see him as Tony. Almost like when the same things that I'm kind of making fun of, and the kind of ridiculousness and the almost innocent charm. I don't get that from Elvis at all. So you almost need that in order to buy into the love, because it's so simplistic and it's so charming in that way that, like you said, it works in favor of the. Does this make sense? Not really, but hey, they seem kind of love struck anyway. They're young and they're goofy, so okay.
Yeah, and in terms of adaptation, some other smart choices that they made here. They've basically cut all adults out of this. There are none except for the Krupke and I don't remember the name of that guy, but like those are the only adults, and Doc, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, the shop owner. But you know, in the play, you have Juliet's nurse and you have her parents and you have like the Montague parents and da-da-da.
Yeah, there's one scene where Maria goes, oh, my dad's sleeping. And I was like, their parents live here?
They
like,
have parents?
What? It's like the teachers in Charlie Brown. It's
yeah. But I think that's the right choice for this because it has to, you have to get the sense that their world is operating on its own internal logic. And whatever we may think about the logic of that world, it is like, that's the rules of the neighborhood. And so they have, within that constraint, they really don't have any choices. So it's like, we have to rumble because we just have to. There's this honor code. And actually, it's a pretty good translation of like the Shakespearean sort of like, we have to duel now, where it's like, we have a war council. We got to like, your best guy fights our best guy. They establish the value systems and the world really early on. And by stripping away like adults, stripping away other characters, other people in the neighborhood that might interfere with it. And again, creating these like claustrophobic spaces, you get the sense that these characters don't feel that they have choices. Like, maybe your choice is just to not fight. Well, that doesn't exist in this world. Or maybe your choice is just to like leave. Well, you don't really get to. That's not how any of this works. So you have to create that enclosure. And I feel like the movie does it really well. Now, that being said, the extent to which it's able to still sell a love story that doesn't have a solid grounding in reality is debatable. I do think that some of the characters, though, behave more like and act more like humans than others. And of course, George Takiris and Rita Moreno's performances are the ones where you're like, Anita behaves like a person.
Right.
She's like, you're acting crazy. You're acting illogical. This is a terrible idea. You don't love him. What's happening? Like,
yeah, you're absolutely right. I think Anita in particular, Anita and Bernardo, those characters anchor this in a sincere reality that you just, Tony and Maria can't.
They don't.
Like it's the one, this movie's in kind of a constant push and pull where it's like, how serious do we want to be? How whimsical do we want to be?
Exactly.
And then it takes a real dark turn. Like, I mean, when Anita goes into the bar, she goes into the shop, and the
It
guys
is
basically
bad.
start like tearing her clothes off, and it was just like, where did this come from?
It is
Totally, the movie never really loses focus as far as like, I never felt like it was super whiplash, but that was definitely very shocking, like in this movie, to have that moment. And basically the owner comes along and he's like, what are you guys doing? Stop it. I was like, are we supposed to, if I'm supposed to be sympathizing with the Jets, I'm definitely not. I'm sympathizing with her, but like, where did this come from? And then the darkness of the conclusion to it all. It's tough because of the fact that you are getting this like very whimsical innocence, and then you have this darkness kind of boiling beneath the surface, and the movie doesn't really, it's almost like it can't quite figure it out until the end. And by then you kind of start to see what the big picture was. You're like, oh, I see. It's kind of like the innocence lost, like this beautiful, wonderful, whimsical thing is dragged down into the muck of this rivalry, and it's kind of corrupted in that way. Because at the end of the day, I think what Ebert was complaining about is that Maria didn't die at the end, like Juliet dies, but like, I don't think that affects the effectiveness of the ending. It still feels solemn, and it still feels emotional and moving and memorable in the ways I think it's trying to be. It doesn't feel like an ending that's like, oh, they pulled their punches. When the end text came up on the screen after Maria and Natalie Wood's just been sobbing, and everybody walks off kind of like, no, nothing is reconciled, nobody's happy, nobody really got what they wanted, and it's the end of the movie. That's not a cheesy like, oh, but it's a Hollywood movie. That's a pretty dark thing, and especially for I think what musicals were expected to be, and personally what I expected this movie to be. I was kind of shocked but very impressed with them managing to stick the landing despite the kind of weird tonal differences.
The thing about musicals is people go to see them because they are fun and they are escapist, right? You're escaping from reality, even if you're watching like a sort of a tragic musical, something like Les Miserables, right? It's obviously very moving. It's very sad, but it's still escapist. And the thing about this movie is when it starts to veer into real violence and real hatred, like racism and sexual assault, and like it gets real bad. It kind of stops being escapist in a way that feels kind of icky. And not that I don't like those parts. And in fact, the criticism, it's interesting to read now, the criticism at the time was like, if this movie had been a little bit more grounded in terms of like the love story and in terms of some of the real issues, right? Because again, what we have is street gangs in New York, and like they snap at each other and they're like, they're like dance fighting. And so they're like, if that had been like more realistic, maybe this would have even more power. And I think that might be true, but I'm not really sure that then it would be a musical anymore, right? Like, I don't know. I agree that like Richard Beymer feels goofy, and I agree that, you know, some of the choreography or like, you know, the fact that they have to like use fake slang, that kind of thing. Like when you get into some of that where you're like, it's goofy. And you think about, well, how could you have changed it? How could you have grounded it a little bit better? How could you have made it, I don't know, sort of more human and dark or consistent? But at the same time, I'm not sure anybody wants that movie. Like, I'm not sure that I do.
No.
Would it have more of an, like, because I will say one thing, I don't cry. Like, this movie doesn't make me cry. It does really move me, but mostly because it's so technically impressive.
Yes. Yeah.
But
you don't feel an emotional connection to it because the movie, until the ending, the movie is not earning, like, we're not talking about a love that like surpasses time and space. We're talking about like puppy love that suddenly becomes something very, very dramatic. Again, the Romeo and Juliet comparison was something I had to keep in the back of my mind, because I'm not read up on Shakespeare, not nearly as much as I'm sure some people are. I know the general story, but I don't, that's the general mood of that play. And
Yeah.
it's also, I think Shakespeare is sort of commenting on how foolish it feels.
Of course.
And I think the problem is maybe with West Side Story. And again, you're absolutely right. I call it a problem. I don't think there's anything I would necessarily change.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if there's anything you can change. I think it's inherent to the DNA of this story. But I think maybe by introducing, the implication of gang warfare and these other serious issues, Shakespeare was always like, yeah, these teenagers are kind of dumb. Like they're kind of silly in their love struck ways. And West Side Story doesn't seem to say that. And it's also like, and also we're going to say these very serious things. And you're like, this is a lot to take in. This is a lot.
And the beautiful thing that this adaptation of Shakespeare does, and especially this particular version of it with the movie musical, is how heightened it is. Everything has the volume cranked all the way up on it. The cost of that is the loss of some emotional connection to something that would be a little bit more subtle or a little bit more realistic. And the heightenedness of this, including the heightenedness of the violence and the emotion. So like when you think about the Rumble, it's a dance, right? Yeah. Imagine if they shot the Rumble like a real fight, which would be dirty and ugly, a lot bloodier, a lot whatever. So it's this stylized, heightened thing. And the result is you don't get the emotional gut punch that you would get from something that's more realistic. And I think that that's good. You have to sacrifice something to make this lavish portrait of, sort of an incendiary time and place and fictionalized, like fantastical time and place. You have to sacrifice something. And the obvious thing that you're going to have to do is sacrifice some of that emotional core that you could perhaps tap your way into with some of the music and some of these other things, but you're not going to be able to keep it. You're not going to be able to keep it in the way that a non-musical version of this would do.
I think you're right. Here's another question.
Yeah.
We touched on this a little bit in the first part. Steven Spielberg is making a new version of West Side Story. Yeah. And when I say new, I assume it's going to be taking place in the same time period. I just mean new, that there is a Steven Spielberg adaptation of West Side Story coming out hopefully in December.
Knock all the wood.
Please knock all the wood, cross all the fingers. What does that look like? Do we want that? Do we need that? As we're both, I think we'd both say Spielberg is our favorite filmmaker.
Yep.
What do you think? I just want to, from that perspective, how do we feel about this?
I have concerns. Here's the thing. If anybody can do it, no, I don't even know if I want to say that. I was going to say if anybody can do it, Spielberg can't.
That was, it's funny. That was like my first thought too. I was like, well, who else would I want to do?
Actually, maybe.
I don't know. Spielberg is still making arguably great movies still, but look at Ready Player One. Like, why did Spielberg need to direct it?
Right.
Maybe that's what I feel about West Side Story, is why does Spielberg need to direct this? I'm happy that he's doing it. I think he's not really done a musical, has he?
No, and that's exactly what I was about to say. Like, what is the logic? And obviously you're not hiring Spielberg. Spielberg is just telling you, I'm making West Side Story, and you're just writing him a check, and you're like, great. So it's not like a hire situation, but what is the logic of Spielberg is the guy? Or what is the reference point? Like, what was the thing that you made, Spielberg, that prepared you to do this? Not that I think that there's anything he can't do, truly.
But there are whatever he wants by this point. But why?
Sure.
Why West Side Story? Like, why now?
And the spectacle piece of it is something that doesn't really worry me at all. Like, we all know that Spielberg is the maker of iconic images. Like, so the idea that he's going to be able to make something visually stunning, that's not in doubt for me. Actually, one of the things that worries me the most about it is the casting. Because not that I have any problem with
Ansel Elgort.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Not that I have any problem with him per se, but I want to talk about something that is just sort of an inherent problem in making movie musicals. When you look at classic Hollywood movie musicals with Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, what you have are these towering talents where they're really doing the singing and the dancing and the acting. And all you need to do is point the camera at them. I mean, but these are like once in a generation kind of guys, right? Like, those guys don't come along very often. Most people are not as wildly talented singers as they are dancers, as they are actors. It just
We
kind
just
of
spent
doesn't
so
happen.
much of this episode talking about just how mind-blowing West Side Story is for pulling that off, finding those people.
Right. But at the same time, your two leads here are not doing their own singing. And they are also not like the best dancers in this whole thing. Like Rita Moreno is incredible. And she's, for me, she's like probably the most impressive, like breathtaking talent in it. But like, and Russ Tamblyn, of course. Okay, but he's not like the singing voice that you remember necessarily, right? So like there's these things where you really, really wisely grabbed members of the Broadway cast and put them in the movie. Smart. And then you also cast like more Hollywood style of actors and they didn't do their own singing. And back in the day, that was a very acceptable way to approach making a musical. That was just standard. We all knew Natalie Wood wasn't doing her own singing. We all knew that Audrey Hepburn wasn't doing her own singing in My Fair Lady. We all knew that, and we were fine with it. That was just kind of a part of the thing. My concern is filmmaking of movie musicals has veered towards this verisimilitude, and I mostly blame Tom Hooper.
Let's blame him for a lot of things, not just that.
But like, there's for some reason this value. What was the other movie musical that came out where everyone was doing their own singing on set? And I'm just like, why?
I don't know.
Probably
Les Mis is the only one I can think of because I remember they made it such a big deal. Did they do that for Cats too?
I think so. Or
let's we're blaming Tom Hooper. Let's just blame him.
Let's blame him for everything. But for some reason, a weird emphasis placed on the meta factor. I think it's because we know so much about filmmaking now that we'll get mad if the actors don't do their own whatever. So, like imagine the big to-do about Ryan Gosling learning to play the piano for La La Land, which I'm like, good. Like, I truly wouldn't care if he hadn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It wouldn't make me angry. Like, it's impressive that he did, okay, but it wouldn't make me angry to learn that he hadn't because it wouldn't detract from my experience of watching the movie. So I feel like either way, what you want is to put the very best singing, the very best dancing, and the very best acting on the screen if you can. And if you have some kind of towering talent, great, put them in it. And in fact, take a chance maybe on a Broadway star who's really got the dancing and singing chops and maybe let him try to act. I don't know. Try it.
I love that.
Like,
I love that the implication is they can't act. They're on Broadway, but they can
can.
only sing and dance. No acting allowed.
I mean, they probably can is the thing, but we often don't give Broadway stars that the chance to do it.
It is a different kind of acting. I mean, they talk about it a lot, but it's true. Stage acting is very different from film.
Sure, but that doesn't mean a stage actor can't do it on film.
Right?
But
exactly.
I just feel like there's a weird meta factor where for some reason people don't want to make movies in the way that they used to, which is like you always knew that there was somebody else playing the piano. You always knew that there was somebody else singing, and it's still fun to watch and impressive to watch. I just wonder about the casting here. Are you going to cast a mediocre dancer and a mediocre by who's like I'm sure they're still great, but like, are you going to cast somebody who doesn't have the voice and still let them sing the part, Russell Crowe, when you could just cast somebody who can really sing it? I just don't. I don't understand that movement or that shift in the business, and I don't want West Side Story to succumb to that kind of ideology of filmmaking.
West Side Story, when you have a movie that is so of its time, and also, like you said, so many things had to align for this to work. Steven Spielberg is directing this remake on his own. Where's Jerome Robbins? You know what I mean? I just said, I think part of why that movie is so outstanding and why it doesn't fall into the trap of a lot of on-screen musicals is because of that collaboration. And I know Robert Wise kind of took over, but he was very collaborative. He even was like, we're staying in touch, Jerome. Also, your name is you're getting when they won the Oscar, they won it together. They were both credited. That is so important. The movie has this pool of talent, this amazing choreography. You can't recreate that. I think when people complain about remakes, and there have been good remakes, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, there are good ones out there, but when we're talking about classic cinema and things that are amazing on their own terms, you have to ask yourself, well, why doesn't this need a remake? And in this case, it's because you watch it and it is so much of its time. It is so much that particular cast of players that are able to pull off this amazing choreography and that energy. There is only one Jerome Robbins. It's the implication that it's not lightning in a bottle. It absolutely
Right.
is.
Exactly.
Why risk that? I love
Right.
Spielberg. I'm excited to see it. Of course, I probably will see it. But there's to your point, not only is there a verisimilitude that is a little frustrating, especially when it comes to musicals. I think La La Land did a really good job of finding that balance and that kind of whimsical element while grounding it in real human emotion.
Sure.
That's about as great as a modern musical could be, I think. West Side Story, on the other hand, do I want that? And also, do I want the modern sheen, like that kind of layer of or that filter of
I do not want the Greatest Showman version of West Side Story.
Yeah,
Get
do I
it
want
out
that
of here.
21st century vibe? You know
And
what I mean?
I don't think Spielberg is going to go that direction.
No.
I understand that The Greatest Showman made its money and whatever, great and fine if you like it. But it's that slick, like sort of like CGI,
Yeah.
pop music kind of version of a musical. And if that's what a musical is, then stop it. Like,
And I mean, we could. It's Spielberg we're talking about. He knows all these things, but also we've seen him kind of succumb to some of the dangers of this new technology, and we've seen
yes, we have
the flip side of Spielberg's brilliance when he gets enamored with something
with a toy.
Yes,
With a cool toy.
in the same way, a lot of great filmmakers have kind of fallen apart when they are when they learn about a particular technology or get an opportunity to do something from the standpoint of how innovative it is versus looking at it from a storytelling perspective. So that makes me nervous. We've seen that Spielberg. We've seen the downside of that.
Yeah.
West Side Story, without knowing anything about it other than just the barest surface level stuff in the casting, that makes me nervous. You can't retain the charm of this movie, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, I also worry too that when you have something that in its own right is now iconic, like, do you really want to see anybody else singing and dancing America or Cool?
Yeah.
Like, I don't. Like,
well, the argument can be made to the contrary that, oh, well, it's the same thing as Broadway. You have different interpretations, different performances. But again, we're forgetting
it's doing
about
something different.
It's a stage play. It's a theatrical performance. That is not the same as a film that will live forever. A
Right.
performance
Committing
is a once in
something
a
to
lifetime
film.
experience, and that energy is something that is unique to the theater. You don't get to use that as a fallback to say, well, they do it in theater, so we can make 50,000 Spider-Man movies and with 30,000 different actors and nobody will get tired of it. It's like, no, it's not the same thing, and that's what makes me nervous.
There's a difference between like so I think the best thing Spielberg could potentially do here is change it, like just change it.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have said that they're planning to adhere more closely to the Broadway musical, which is quite different. Like the songs are in different places and there's different like, orchestration, and the storyline kind of unfolds a little bit differently in the Broadway musical. And
Right.
so they are saying it's more of an interpretation. It's not so much a remake of the film. It's more of from 1961. It's more of a movie version of the Broadway musical.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so if you are going to change it a decent amount,
Do it.
Absolutely do it. I don't know what the plan is, but I hope it's different enough that we're not just going to stand it side by side with this, because I don't know what you could stand side by side with this.
Yeah, you simply can't.
It's so tremendous, and it's still so watchable. So I've seen every version of A Star is Born, and there are 5, I believe. It's a long story, but every single version of A Star is Born is wildly different than the one before. Like, they roughly follow the same character arc, the same 2 character arcs, but the 2 characters that are at the heart of A Star is Born are never like the same characters. They typically don't even have the same names as the previous version. So, probably the version before, the Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga version that came out. The one before that is the Barbra Streisand version from the 70s, and Chris Christopherson, God bless. But if you watch that version, it's nothing like the Broadway. It's nothing like the new Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga version at all. And so if you're going to tell an archetypal story, reinvent it, which if you have songs like in
I think we're starting to touch on something that at the core is what's bothering us. What does Spielberg, because here's the thing, Bradley Cooper directed A Star is Born, and I don't know what involvement he had. Like you said, I haven't seen any of them. I don't know if he wrote the screenplay or adapted the screenplay himself, but Bradley Cooper very clearly had a personal vision and a personal story to tell.
Yeah.
Spielberg has told practically every personal story he has to tell. So what could he possibly have to express that the framework of West Side Story could provide?
Right.
Maybe that is at the core, because we're both kind of like, do we want this? I don't know. We love Spielberg, but why are we feel so weird about his involvement? Maybe that's it. What unique perspective does he have to offer to West Side Story? And he may be past, he's well into his 70s now. I mean, like, I think he's offered just about everything he has to offer.
I don't know. It's not like I'm arguing for him to retire or anything like that.
No, I don't want him to. You're right.
No, but I do think, and I'm not, I don't know him personally or anything. I do agree, and we talked about this when we were discussing Minority Report, that he is at his best, even though he himself typically is not a writer and typically does not write his own films. We do consider him to be an auteur because there does feel in his most iconic films something very personal at the core of them. And if he's able to find something, or if there is something at the core of West Side Story that is this raw nerve that he can sort of expose, then I think great. And I'm excited and optimistic and hopeful to see what that is. I think overall, the idea of a remake is this idea of a safe bet, financially speaking. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is often the impetus for doing a remake, and not because you have something personal to say about it, or something that hasn't been said yet, right, about a particular story or a set of circumstances or characters or archetype, that kind of thing. So I want that to be the case. I want it to not be a financial decision. I want it to be a true artistic decision. And if it is, I'm here for it all day. If we're doing it because it was the highest grossing movie musical of all time, which it was, that's where I go, please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't.
This is good. I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we needed that.
Me too.
We needed to get that off our chest and just like figure out how we feel about that.
Me too. The only other thing I want to say about it is Irene Sheriff is amazing, and the costume design here. And that was the thing that blew me away about it this time. Think about that dance sequence where all of the sharks are dressed in red and purple. Mm-hmm. And all of the jets are dressed in blue and yellow. Like, why on earth would you pick these, like, this color palette? And then the walls of the dance hall are bright red. It's just like so cool and so well envisioned. I mean, if you just look at the costumes throughout the entire thing, they're incredible. And she won an Oscar for it, and for many other movies. But yeah, well
deserved. Yeah. I think this movie, I mean, this is one of those movies I can see why it won Best Picture. I was looking to see what it was up against, and there wasn't a whole lot of competition from what I can tell, but like, this feels absolutely like it's definitely classic. It's definitely a great musical, definitely deserving to be a Best Picture winner. All of the above.
Yeah.
It checks all the boxes.
It's
what
a
else?
milestone.
Anything else? Or
that's basically it. Just go watch West Side Story if you haven't. Like,
if you haven't,
and honestly, if you haven't, what are you even doing?
Who are you? Why are you listening to this?
Yeah, seriously, get out of here.
The whole movie. Although you're probably smarter than me and know more about the plot of West Side Story. Hey, I'm glad I got to experience this, and I got to see it like with completely fresh eyes. Watching the play.
If you need any more convincing to see a musical where 9 or 12 guys get on 3 seesaws and like walk up them, and
that's
then
when I knew I loved it.
I was like, that's it. That's all you need.
This is it.
It's amazing.
I think this is a prime example of a cinematic adaptation of a Broadway production done right. It feels like the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
But I guess final ratings.
I forgot we have to do this.
Our rating system. I was gonna say. Do we want to do snaps? I feel like it has to be snaps.
It's got to be
right?
snaps. Yeah.
So how many snaps, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, would you give West Side Story?
I give this 5 out of 5 snaps. Not a problem for me.
I'll go ahead and give it 4 solid snaps. It gets 4 solid snaps. It's definitely...
What are you docking a snap for?
I'm docking a snap because I think the contrast between the seriousness and the goofiness. I still have to wrap my head around it.
Is it for Richard Beimer? You're docking a whole snap for Richard Beimer.
No, I love him. I mean, the Twin Peaks stuff, I still can't get over it. I was meant to watch this movie. That being said, it's undoubtedly, this is a classic. It's well worth your time. I would absolutely 100% recommend it. And I feel like in retrospect, many more snaps. I'm always up for snapping. That's always a good thing. So that's great. Well, Tricia, thank you so much for coming back, for introducing me to this film. This has been a delight. And I would love to hear more about where, we don't get to talk all the time, but where can I listen to you talk, should I so desire? Like where do I find you? Isn't there like a little, like a YouTube channel?
Yeah,
or
there
a
is.
podcast out there? Tell me about those.
So I write for the YouTube channel Lessons from the Screenplay, which is Michael Tucker's YouTube channel. And we do video essays where we break down screenwriting techniques in film. Gosh, let me tell you something for sure. We're getting real ambitious over there. So we recently released a video about Parasite versus Sunset Boulevard,
which was great
because those two movies surprisingly have some stuff in common. We got into the disillusionment arc, and it was a trip and a half breaking apart those movies and seeing their arcs. And we have some stuff that we are cooking up that is like so unhinged. Like, I don't know. We're getting really ambitious over there. We've got some really, really cool collaborations coming out, some other versus videos where we're comparing things that you might not originally think should be compared to each other or have anything in common. And we're getting into some screenwriting techniques that are, I think, really valuable. And so, yeah. And then we also have an accompanying podcast that we do called Beyond the Screenplay. I'm one of the co-hosts of it, along with Michael Tucker, who runs the channel, and Alex Calleros and Brian Bittner, who have both also been on your show. So
all of them we're going to have this, I think, should kick off a new cycle.
I love it. Yeah. Bring us all back on. And that's our podcast Beyond the Screenplay. And you can listen to us do deeper dives into storytelling techniques, but particularly from a screenwriting perspective.
And on the social medias, where can people find you?
I'm at Tricia Jean A, Tricia. Jean on Twitter.
And I'm at Shawn Doorman on Twitter and at Shawn Doorman on Instagram. And of course, there's also the Nerd Party. You can go to thenerdparty.com, go to Twitter, find them at Join Nerd Party, and they're just at the Nerd Party on Instagram and the Nerd Party on Facebook. Go and I would love to hear more conversations about West Side Story. How are we feeling about Spielberg? Like, I want to hear some more opinions and some more thoughts about that. Hopefully it will be released this year. I would love to see it. That would be great.
Me too. What a time to be alive.
Yes, it's a crazy time to be alive. Tricia, this has been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shawn.
We will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.